Focus. JustProfessor here. A person in a white coat tells you something is true, and you instantly believe them without question. A CEO shares their opinion, and you treat it like fact. Someone has a fancy title, and suddenly their words carry more weight than actual evidence. Your brain is programmed to obey authority, and it's making you believe things you shouldn't. Think about the last time you heard advice from a doctor, or a professor, or some expert with impressive credentials. Did you question what they said, or did you just accept it because of who they were? Most people do the second thing. We're wired to trust authority figures, and that made sense historically when authorities actually knew more than everyone else. But now, authority bias is being used against you. People wear the costume of authority to manipulate you, and your brain falls for it every single time. Authority bias is when you're more likely to believe or obey someone just because they have authority, credentials, or high status. You trust what they say not because of the evidence they provide, but because of their position. A doctor says something about health and you believe it. A CEO says something about business and you believe it. A professor says something about their field and you believe it, even when what they're saying might be wrong, outdated, or outside their actual area of knowledge. This bias exists because throughout human history, following authority usually worked out okay. The elder in your tribe probably did know more. The experienced hunter probably had better advice. Social hierarchies existed for reasons, and respecting them helped groups function. So our brains evolved to automatically give extra weight to what authority figures say. We don't critically evaluate their claims the same way we'd evaluate claims from a random person. But here's the problem. Authority doesn't equal correctness. Having credentials in one area doesn't make someone right about everything. Being successful doesn't mean someone understands why they succeeded. Having a fancy title doesn't mean someone is honest or knowledgeable. Yet, your brain treats authority as a shortcut for truth, and that shortcut is constantly leading you to wrong conclusions. Let me show you how this plays out everywhere. Medical authority is probably the most obvious example. When a doctor tells you something, you usually just believe it, and often that's fine. Doctors do have real expertise. But doctors can be wrong. They can be outdated in their knowledge. They can have biases. They can be outside their area of specialization. But authority bias makes patients hesitant to question them or get second opinions. The white coat and the title create automatic trust that might not be deserved in every situation. This gets worse when people who aren't real experts dress up like them. You see someone in a white coat in a commercial recommending a product. Your brain registers authority figure, even though that person might be an actor. Advertisers use this constantly. They put people in lab coats, use scientific-sounding language, throw in some credentials, and your authority bias kicks in. You believe the claim more than you would if the same claim came from someone in regular clothes. Celebrity endorsements exploit authority bias too, but in a weird way. A famous actor has authority in acting. But when they recommend a skincare product or a political candidate or a health treatment, authority bias makes you give their opinion extra weight, even though they have no real expertise in those areas. They have status and fame, which your brain treats as authority, so you trust them about things they know nothing about. CEOs and business leaders get massive authority bias benefits. When a billionaire gives advice about success, people listen like it's gospel. But that person might have succeeded through luck, timing, connections, or circumstances that don't apply to you. Their success doesn't mean they actually understand how they succeeded or that their advice is good. Yet authority bias makes people buy their books, follow their advice, and try to copy their methods just because they have the authority of wealth and success. Academic credentials create powerful authority bias. Someone has a PhD, and suddenly everything they say in their field is treated as unquestionable truth. But academics disagree with each other constantly. Having a doctorate means you did research and wrote a dissertation. It doesn't mean you're right about everything in your field. Yet authority bias makes people shut down critical thinking when doctor or professor appears before someone's name. This gets really dangerous when experts speak outside their expertise. A physicist might give confident opinions about economics. A doctor might make claims about climate science. A successful entrepreneur might share theories about education. They have authority in one domain, and authority bias makes people trust them in completely different domains where they have no real expertise. Political authority shows this bias clearly. When government officials make statements, people often believe them just because of their position. The president says something, and it carries weight because of the office, not necessarily because of the evidence. This happens across all political sides. People trust authorities from their own side and question authorities from the other side, but both reactions are authority bias in action. Social media influencers have figured out how to fake authority. They use professional-looking videos, confident presentation, technical jargon, impressive-sounding credentials that might be meaningless. They create the appearance of authority, and that's enough to trigger authority bias in viewers. People believe them not because they've verified the information, but because the presentation has authority markers. The Milgram experiments demonstrated how extreme authority bias can get. Researchers had ordinary people deliver what they thought were dangerous electric shocks to other people just because someone in a lab coat told them to. The authority figure wasn't threatening them or forcing them. The lab coat and the title of researcher was enough to make people do things that went against their own moral judgment. That's how powerful this bias is. Courtroom settings are designed around authority bias. Judges wear robes and sit elevated. Lawyers use formal language and credentials. Expert witnesses are brought in specifically to use their authority to sway juries. The entire system uses symbols and rituals of authority to influence decision-making. And it works because authority bias is so strong. So how do you fight authority bias? How do you evaluate claims based on evidence instead of based on who's making them? First, separate the person from the claim. When someone tells you something, focus on what they're saying and what evidence supports it, not on their credentials or title. Ask yourself, would I believe this claim if a random person said it? If the answer is no, you need to examine why you're believing it from the authority figure. Don't let titles or credentials replace actual evidence. Second, remember that expertise is narrow. Someone might be an expert in one specific area and know nothing about related areas. A heart surgeon doesn't necessarily know about nutrition. A successful investor doesn't necessarily understand economics broadly. A climate scientist doesn't necessarily know about climate policy. When someone speaks outside their narrow expertise, their authority in their field doesn't transfer. Third, question confidence. Authority figures often speak with extreme confidence, and that confidence triggers authority bias even more. But confidence and correctness are different things. Some of the most confident authorities are wrong, and some of the most uncertain experts are actually being appropriately humble about complex topics. Don't mistake confident presentation for truth. Fourth, look for consensus among experts, not just one authority. One doctor's opinion is less reliable than what most doctors agree on. One economist's theory is less trustworthy than what economic research generally shows. Authority bias makes you trust the single impressive authority figure, but truth is more likely to be found in widespread expert agreement than in one person's claims. Fifth, be extra skeptical when authority figures are selling something. If an expert is promoting a product, a service, or their own work, they have incentives beyond just sharing truth. That doesn't mean they're lying, but it means their authority should be questioned more carefully. Follow the incentives. Sixth, check if authorities disagree. On most complex topics, experts don't all agree. When you hear one authority make a claim, look for what other experts say. If there's disagreement, that's crucial context. Authority bias makes you stop investigating after hearing one authority, but you should be doing the opposite. Seventh, teach yourself to evaluate evidence directly. Don't rely on authorities to tell you what's true. Look at the data yourself when possible. Understand the reasoning behind claims. The more you practice evaluating evidence independently, the less you'll need to rely on authority as a shortcut. Authority bias is making you trust people you shouldn't trust and believe things you shouldn't believe. It's making you accept claims without evidence just because they came from someone with a title or credentials or status. And it's being deliberately exploited by advertisers, influencers, con artists, and anyone who understands that dressing up like an authority figure makes people stop thinking critically. Having authority or expertise in one area doesn't make someone right about everything. Being successful doesn't mean someone understands their success. Having confidence doesn't mean having correctness. Wearing a lab coat doesn't mean knowing science. But your brain wants shortcuts, and authority is one of the most powerful shortcuts it uses. You can't completely eliminate authority bias. It's too deeply wired into how humans think socially. But you can become aware of it. You can catch yourself giving extra weight to claims just because of who said them. You can force yourself to evaluate evidence instead of credentials. You can question authorities the same way you'd question anyone else. The next time someone with impressive credentials tells you something, don't automatically believe it. Ask what evidence supports the claim. Ask if this is really their area of expertise. Ask if other experts agree. Ask if they have incentives to say what they're saying. Treat authority figures as one source of information, not as automatic truth. Stop letting titles replace thinking. Stop letting credentials replace evidence. Stop letting status replace verification. Authority bias is one of the easiest biases to exploit, which means it's one of the most important biases to recognize and resist. Watch the next video to learn about another social bias controlling your judgments.